February 16th meeting of the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management. Seeing I see Councillor Drews has joined us, so just missing Councillor Brockington and Eglai. So we're good for quorum. Declarations of interest. Seeing none. Confirmation of minutes from the meeting of the 15th of December, 2020. Are those carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you very much. Item number 1 on the agenda is a status update for the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management for inquiries and motions for the period ending February 4th, 2021. That the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management received this report for information. Is the report received?
Received.
Thank you. And items 2 and 3, we're going to have brief presentations on them. So item number 2 is the residential stormwater retrofit pilot program, Rain Ready Ottawa. I don't have my notes in front of me, so.
You're holding that, right, Chair?
Yeah, so there's going to be a presentation on item 2 and on item 3. So I'll just go right into that right now. So I see we have Julia Robinson here to do a update us on the residential stormwater retrofit pilot program.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. I'll just do a check to make sure that my my volume is okay. You can hear me?
Yep, all good.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you. My name is Julia Robinson. I'm a project manager in the Climate Change and Resiliency section in PIDE. And I'm here this morning to present a proposed program that will encourage and incentivize widespread adoption of practices to manage stormwater runoff from residential properties. So I will provide the background to the program, and then I'll turn it over to Simon Greenland-Smith, who will provide an overview of the program goals, the components, and the eligibility. This program has been developed in close collaboration with Infrastructure Services, and staff from Infrastructure Services are also here with us this morning to answer any questions as needed. Next slide, please. So this program was developed based on direction from the Ottawa River Action Plan and the city's 2 stormwater retrofit plans in Pinecrest Creek, Westboro, and the Eastern Subwatersheds. So these 2 areas are referred to as the city's priority retrofit areas and are shown in dark gray on the map. The 2 retrofit studies evaluated local stormwater issues and modeled the impacts and costs of various retrofit scenarios. And the studies recommended long-term or 50-year plans to meet these stormwater objectives. Next slide, please. So just briefly, stormwater management is a particular challenge in older neighborhoods because they were built without modern stormwater management practices. Stormwater runoff is not treated before it enters local streams and creeks and eventually drains into the Ottawa River. And this causes a series of problems, particularly in small receiving watercourses. Next slide, please. The Ottawa River Action Plan and the 2 approved retrofit plans include a mix of solutions which range from very simple actions to complex capital projects. In established neighborhoods, on-site management is a key part of the solution to manage stormwater due to the limited space for conventional practices such as stormwater ponds, and also the time and cost to implement projects like bioretention and street right-of-ways. A major conclusion of both of these plans is that encouraging homeowners to manage runoff on their properties offers the most cost-effective opportunity for increased stormwater management. Next slide, please. So both of the retrofit plans laid out ambitious 50-year targets for the implementation of private property stormwater practices, including those that are listed on this slide. To achieve the stormwater objectives, about 30% of the homes in the Eastern Subwatersheds area would need to undergo retrofit actions. This translates to more than 20,000 homes. The Pinecrest Westboro plan included specific targets for the individual practices. Both plans recommended the development of an awareness and engagement campaign to identify and address the barriers to stormwater management on residential properties. And the program before you today is our response to that direction. So the proposed, next slide, please, Chris. Thanks. The proposed residential stormwater retrofit program is based on a 3-year outreach pilot that was done in neighborhoods near Westboro Beach, a comprehensive review of about 75 similar programs across North America, and lessons learned from other City of Ottawa water incentive programs for homeowners. So key lessons focused on the importance of a comprehensive program, which includes financial incentives, effective education and engagement that addresses local barriers and motivators, and strengthening the capacity of the local landscape industry. Next slide, please. The proposed program also benefited from a range of consultation and engagement. It was informed by the outreach pilot in Westboro Beach, which included a survey of barriers and motivators, as well as internal and public advisory groups. We also consulted internally and externally during these last months on the proposed new program, and feedback from these consultations has been positive. Community partners appreciate the integrated nature of the program, which builds capacity of the landscape industry as well as homeowners. And landscape professionals are keen to attend the Fusion Landscape Professional Program to learn how to effectively solve client issues related to drainage, flooding, and icy driveways or walkways. And we will continue to work with both internal and external stakeholders to provide feedback throughout the pilot and during the program review. So next slide, please. So I'll now turn it over to Simon, who's going to provide an overview of the proposed program.
Thank you very much, Julia. How's my audio? Good. Okay. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. The purpose of this pilot is to test a comprehensive program and make recommendations for a longer-term program to meet the goals of the two retrofit plans. The program has 4 distinct objectives, which are reflected in the program structure of the program. Next slide, please. First, we planned an industry training and certification program to build industry capacity, which will help us reach our long-term targets. We've planned a home assessment program that will put customized advice into the hands of residents, paired with a community engagement program that targets communications and outreach to increase uptake in priority neighborhoods, as well as a new grants and contributions program that will reduce the financial barriers that many residents face. I'll go over each of these programs briefly. Next slide, please. The Fusion Professional Landscape Program has been running in Peel and York regions for several years and is delivered by Landscape Ontario, the primary industry organization for landscape professionals in our province. It's a comprehensive program on how to consider stormwater in landscape design, installation, and maintenance, and will build capacity to help meet installation targets for stormwater practices. It will also allow the city to develop a list of trained and certified contractors that can be referenced in response to resident inquiries. This industry expertise will benefit all residents of Ottawa inside and outside the priority retrofit areas. Next slide, please. Home assessment programs have been successfully implemented in other jurisdictions, including several in Ontario, such as Kitchener-Waterloo and Peel. They're an effective way to ensure residents receive high-quality, customized information on how to address stormwater issues on their property, as well as how to avoid exacerbating stormwater issues and causing problems for their own homes and their neighbors. Home assessment processes will be delivered in collaboration with a local organization and be based on Fusion landscape training. Next slide, please. Research from the Ottawa Rain pilot and from programs across North America confirmed that the upfront cost of installing practices can be a barrier to action for many residents. In response, design and installation incentives will be offered through a new grants and contributions program that supports the following practices on the screen there. To be eligible for design and installation incentives, residents must be located within a priority retrofit area and have undergone a home assessment or have a quote from a Fusion certified landscape professional. Next slide, please. Community outreach and engagement will occur through participation at local events, through targeted campaigns, and through demonstrations. For example, the city will partner with rainbarrel.ca to promote rain barrel use as well as their best practices that increase their effectiveness. Rainbarrel.ca helps local groups fundraise based on the sale of rain barrels. We intend to support these groups in their fundraising efforts by promoting their efforts through social media and community outreach resources. We will also distribute rain barrel how-tos and information on best practices, as well as promotional material about Rain Ready Ottawa, and that'll go out with each rain barrel. Through the program, 3 to 4 demonstration rain gardens will be installed in priority retrofit areas, ideally in high visibility public areas. Once established, the rain garden locations can be used as tour sites for outreach opportunities and will be complemented by signage on how rain gardens work, as well as their associated benefits. Next slide, please. The program is targeted to the city's priority retrofit areas during the pilot to meet the targets of the 2 stormwater management retrofit plans. However, some program elements provide benefits to all residents of Ottawa. Residents in all areas of the city will benefit from educational materials and access to Fusion certified landscape professionals. Homeowners in all the retrofit areas, so these are the areas in light and dark gray on the map that appears there, can request a free home consultation to provide personal advice, professional advice on solutions for their property. So that's customized advice. Homeowners within the priority retrofit areas, the 3 dark gray areas there, will also be eligible for financial incentives. Community outreach will be prioritized in these 2 priority retrofit areas in the Pinecrest Westboro area and the eastern subwatersheds. And with the next slide, I'll pass it back to Julia, and thank you for your time.
And I'll unmute myself. Thank you, Simon. So the Rain Ready program is a 3-year pilot that was starting in 2021. So the intent is for the program to launch in the spring with the initial training of the Fusion Landscape Professional Program, the development and the launch of the Home Assessment Program, and program promotion. Program implementation will follow all public health recommendations to protect against the spread of COVID-19. We'll review the pilot in early 2023 and bring back a report to this committee and council in Q3. The $750,000 budget is funded through existing capital accounts for the stormwater retrofit program. The budget allows for an estimated 125 projects to be completed in 3 years, most of which, and we're estimating about 80%, are anticipated to be in the priority stormwater retrofit areas. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the proposed Rain Ready Ottawa program is a multifaceted approach to engage and incentivize residents and build landscape industry capacity to design, install, and maintain stormwater management features on residential property. As I said, the pilot will be evaluated in 2023 with a report back to committee and council with a recommendation for a long-term program. So that's the end of our presentation. We'd be pleased to answer any questions.
All right, thank you for that, Julia. So we do have a delegation which we'll go to first, just to confirm. So you aren't necessarily asking for approval of funding today, because you do have that right in the stormwater retrofit program already.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So our first, we have one delegation on this coming from. This will be a true test of internet's connectivity today, coming from beautiful downtown Burt's Rapids. In a snowstorm. Mary Hegan. Is Mary here?
Do you see me? Do you hear me?
I can do both things, yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, well, I'm delighted to join you, especially on this topic from beautiful downtown Burt's Rapids, which is presently snowed in. So, and it's still beautiful here. And I'm speaking today on behalf of CAFES, the Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability. And we have membership community associations and individuals all across the city, from downtown core, suburbs, and the rural areas, such as where I'm speaking from you today. So we just wanted to join this discussion to say how excited and impressed we are with the details in the preparation work of staff, including some community surveys and consultation leading up to this a residential retrofit pilot program. In preparation for today's discussion and approval, we reached out to a number of our community members who live within the pilot project areas or very nearby, And we got instant reaction from everybody saying, fascinating, interesting. I hope and pray that we fall within the pilot project area. And we also heard from other groups saying, oh, I hope we can learn from all the staff work, the research, the background work, the literature searches that has led up to this package moving forward. And which so much so that we really want to pick up on Simon's comment this morning about during the 2-year pilot project, that we hope staff will be able to continue with an educational update program for all communities and all landowners, because there's such a high interest. As you well know, the stay-at-home pandemic is increasing dramatically people's interest in their backyards, their front yards, looking after their houses, and learning how to deal with the extreme storms mixed with drought in terms of rainfall and protecting the foundations of their homes. So we hope that during the next 2 years, there will be a chance for staff to continue their outreach and the communications, maybe have guidance documents, and keep everybody abreast of what you're learning from the pilot project areas. If there's any networking going on, maybe you can open that part to communities right across the city. And as cafes, with our growing network of community associations, we will be willing to work with staff on building community knowledge and interests. And so maybe by the end of the pilot in 2003, you'll have a number of communities all ready to work on this on an ongoing basis.
All right, thank you very much, Mary. Appreciate your presence here today and your support for the program. Any questions for me? Oh yes, Councillor Hughley. Is that for this, or is that just on general?
No, sorry, I'll save it for staff.
Okay. All right. Thanks again, Mary. Appreciate you taking the time to come here today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So just before we get to questions for staff, just quick update on, not update, but this report, a lot of it stems from the Otter River Action Plan, which was approved over 10 years ago, now actually 11 years ago now. And then from the various sub-watershed studies, the Pinecrest Westboro one, which we approved back in 2011. And then the more recent one, the Eastern Sub-Watershed Study, which this committee approved in 2019. It also stems from a motion that was brought forward as part of our water and wastewater and stormwater rate structure program that we updated in 2016, and Councillor Eglai, but it was actually moved by Councillor Cloutier to go and look at different options for private stormwater management, which is what brings us to this report here today. So thank you to everyone involved that's gotten us to this point, and I'm happy to go to questions now from members of council, members of committee. Councillor Hughley.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to staff for this excellent report. Just a few questions on it. What's the expected average cost per home for the assessment, the home assessment?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm thinking back here. I mean, we're estimating it is about an hour home visit that the staff will, that the partner organization that we're working with will spend there. So it's basically the equivalent of an hour staff time of a trained professional to come and give that assessment.
So one person coming out and doing the assessment, not a team, and because one of the things in the report, it says at the end of the assessment, they'll get this attractive report. So I was wondering what is that? What are we calling an attractive report here?
So the aim of the report is to clearly outline and identify the results of that assessment, that home assessment, and it's going to be very clear the range of actions which are appropriate and suitable for that particular homeowner to do on their property. And part of the purpose of that report is, a real aim of that home assessment is to make sure that the actions that people are taking are appropriate for their property, are not causing any harm to their property or their neighbor's property. So it will be very clear in outlining that. When we use the term attractive, we mean it will include photos and examples of exactly what they should be doing on their property.
Perfect. Okay, so that could come in the form of an email, for example, instead of a printed report then.
Absolutely, that could happen. It would be an attachment sent by email.
Okay. My next question is, who exactly would we be training in certification for landscaping? Right? Are you talking about training individual residents to become official licensed landscapers?
No, this training will be eligible just for established landscape professional companies. So companies that are already in the business to either design, install, or maintain landscapes in the city. And they need to be a member of Landscape Ontario, and they need to have credentials in order to be eligible for this training.
Okay, and then we would just subsidize or 100% fund the training of their employees in how to deal with, okay, gotcha.
It's a subsidy, we're not paying the entire thing, but it is subsidized because in the long run, we really need landscape companies to adopt and embrace these practices and embed them in their everyday work.
Well, I agree. I agree. I like where you're going with that. I was worried what you were going to try to do was certify residents as landscapers, and there's so much more than this that goes into becoming a good landscaper. Okay, the program on redirecting the eaves trough, you showed one of those plastic things at the bottom of the eaves trough that they cost maybe $20. So I'm wondering, even if you did all four corners of your house, you should be able to do it for under 100. So why are we paying up to $1,000 per house for that?
Absolutely, we are not paying $1,000 for those plastic extenders from a downspout, but in some cases, you need a more involved response to redirect your downspout. So research in the other programs across North America showed that in some cases you need to be burying, for example, the runoff from that downspout so it goes underneath a walkway and gets to a permeable area. Because of course we want to be avoiding any kind of instance where there could be safety issues. So the up to $1,000 would only be eligible if it's a more complex project required to redirect a downspout by putting it underneath a walkway or something similar like that.
Okay. Well, typically what you would do is raise the land closer to the house so that the water runs towards the road where you have a stormwater system, correct? Wouldn't that be the more cost-effective solution to this, and we could do more houses?
Well, in this case, what we're looking to is to redirect that runoff to go onto a permeable surface. And absolutely, the whole purpose of requiring for the application process either a home assessment recommendation or a recommendation from a trained professional is that they are only going to be recommending what is suitable and appropriate for that particular property. So it's very possible that, again, there won't be a lot of expensive applications for that particular rebate.
Okay. Last question for you is, do you have things in place before we start handing out these grants to make it possible for effective audits of the program afterwards, like the verification of the claims to make sure, and I'll give you a quick example. We had the backflow program, which the average cost would cost around $1,500 to do a home. When we ramped up the program quickly, what we found was companies were coming in and automatically claiming the full amount of $5,000 that was reserved for the most difficult cases. But yet every application seemed to be to that amount. And we didn't have the proper controls in place to catch that at the time. So I'm looking to hear from you that you've got something in place in this program before taxpayers' money start going out the door to make sure that we're paying for what we think we're paying for.
Absolutely, and as we mentioned, we did speak to several of the other city programs like the Backwater Valve program to learn from their experience when we were designing this. So there's a couple of steps that are in place to make sure that what the city is rebating is the true and actual cost. The first is that as part of the application, when you get a home assessment or a quote from the landscape professional, that's the first check that on what is most appropriate to be refunded. The second would be that for any project that is of a certain value over $1,000, that there would be a follow-up check to make sure that it was indeed installed as per what the recommendation was, but appropriately. So to make sure we're also not causing any potential problems from a liability perspective of things being installed wrongly. And then the third measure is that we do have factored into the program a percentage of projects, all projects that would be visited and an audit, just to make sure that what was installed was done correctly and was suitable to the property.
Okay, thank you very much. I have to say I'm very impressed. Thank you for the good work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hughley. I appreciate your comments and support. Councillor Cloutier is next.
Thank you, Chair. Merci beaucoup. And thank you, Ms. Robinson, for the presentation. And I too will be supporting the report. But and Councillor Hughley touched on a couple of the elements I wanted to touch on. Ms. Robinson, can you tell me a little bit more about fusion landscaping? I am not certain of the certification of landscapers. Is that done through colleges and universities, perhaps? Will the municipality be providing this fusion landscape training? And is there any plan for colleges or other certifiers for landscapers to provide the program in the future?
Thank you, Councillor. So the Fusion Landscape Program is an established and third-party training and certification program. It was developed, as Simon mentioned, first rolled out in Peel and York regions, but in close collaboration with the Credit Valley Conservation Authority and with Landscape Ontario. So the training, both the training program and the certification program is very much stemmed on the best research that is available right now on stormwater management practices and integrating those into the landscape industry. It follows a guidance manual very much aligned with something called the STEP guidance, which is sort of the industry best practice that is used for all sorts of stormwater management implementation. So absolutely it comes from the development based on our best expertise. In terms of your question around the involvement of universities and colleges, one of the, we've also had some initial discussions with Algonquin College, and they are, again, this is together with Landscape Ontario, because I think in the long run, the vision would be to also involve our local college and universities in the training of our next generation of landscapers as well. So let me know if I haven't answered your question.
Nope, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Is it city staff that will do the home assessment or a Fusion landscaper? And I presume that the assessment must be done to get the grant. Is that correct?
So in order to apply for a grant, you either have to have done a home assessment by a trained professional or have a quote from the certified Fusion landscape professional. In terms of who will deliver that and undertake that home assessment program, we are proposing that would be done as a partnership with a local organization who has expertise in delivering similar kind of home assessment programs. And the home assessors will also be trained in the Fusion landscape professional program. So we're closing the loop so that the people who are advising a home assessment is all being based on the same methodology.
So you said an organization, it might be a third-party organization.
Absolutely. It's a third-party organization, and it's explicitly a third-party organization that is not a landscape industry themselves. We want homeowners to have the option of having, I'll put it in air quotes, unbiased advice from someone that can't benefit directly themselves from that. They also have the option of going to a landscape professional directly, but we thought it would make sense to have both of those options for people to get technical advice.
Noted. During the pilot project, or even after, would the city consider including information on how residents with a knack for do-it-yourself projects can achieve some of their goals on their own, or would they have to be done by the organization, the certified landscaper, the certified fusion landscaper? Have any thoughts with respect to that?
Even during the pilot, we want DIYers to do this. If we take a look at those numbers, those targets that we need to get to, if this program is going to make a difference, we need people of all aptitudes changing what happens on their property to better manage runoff. And so the idea behind providing the education and the information, both in terms of the information that will be available on the website or through outreach, but also through the advice through this home assessment, equips homeowners to either undertake those projects themselves or to hire a qualified landscape professional to do it.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions, Chair. Toronto and Windsor had a program that obligated homeowners to disconnect their downspouts, and Peel was voluntary. What information did you glean from those experiences with respect to the success of redirecting stormwater from impermeable surfaces to permeable surfaces?
So if I'm recalling correctly, the mandatory downspout disconnect programs really involve a disconnect from water that is going straight into the storm sewer system. And so again, that's a problem for part of the purpose of that program is to keep that extra runoff from going into the wastewater system as well. In this case, when we're referring to the redirection programs, we're really looking at a redirect from an impermeable surface to a permeable surface. And again, my understanding is that in terms of the areas that we're looking at, it's more a situation where we want to be redirecting as opposed to that cutting off and getting it, addressing the problems that are going directly into the sewer system, the wastewater sewer system.
Okay, thank you. Last question. In your presentation, you spoke of barriers and motivators. So other than an environmental awareness, a sensitivity, what is the incentive for homeowner to incur the costs, which if per the report, if the program covers 25 to 50% of the costs? Councillor Hubley talked about a $10 downspout, a $20 downspout extender, and it does the trick and it becomes someone else's problem, the city's problem, I recognize. So what additional motivators can we use to make sure we get the numbers as part of the pilot project? And I saw your specific objectives, and in the long term of attaining the objectives of less impact on the environment, on the sewer system.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And I think one of the really important lessons that we get from the various studies on motivators and barriers, both the studies that the city has led when we did the survey during the initial pilot in Westboro, but also from research from all across North America, is that the environment is actually one of the weakest motivators for a program like this. Absolutely, some people are there because they understand what stormwater is and they want to do their part to keep beaches open and to protect their local creeks. But for most people, the main motivator is pride in their property, low maintenance gardens. It's the aesthetics around their home and their property. So a lot of the communications doesn't actually speak to the environmental benefits, which is very hard for someone like myself who comes at it from an environmental perspective and knows that we're meeting stormwater management objectives from the city. But what we've learned is that the communications and outreach best needs to speak to people where they're at. And if what people are really interested in is a beautiful landscape and they don't actually care whether it absorbs rainwater better than the next garden, then it doesn't really matter as long as we get to our targets. And I'll just close by saying that is in part why the Fusion Landscape program is called Fusion Landscape and is not called Effective Stormwater Management Training Program, because it's about communicating and appealing to a very broad range of homeowners who are out there.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much. I thought Keith might go ahead of me. No, very good questions, and I'm very much looking forward to participating in terms of our area, Pinecrest area, in this program. I found that interesting about the communication strategy. Kind of sad, but the facts of life. But hopefully we'll be reaching out to a large number of people anyway, and they'll see the benefits. What is the broader communication strategy in terms of reaching out beyond Pinecrest in that corridor? Just getting people to understand the benefits of this program.
Absolutely, there will be an overarching communications and outreach program, because we know that while this program needs to focus on testing out a program and focusing on the 2 priority retrofit areas, we know that good sound practices for managing rainwater runoff on your home apply to everybody. So there will be a comprehensive communications plan that's put forward. I'm not going to say we're not going to talk about the environmental benefits and the stormwater benefits. We also want to educate people on the multiple benefits that doing these practices will have. So the communications program will speak to the multiple benefits of a program like that. It'll have very practical tips that people can do themselves. It'll point people towards the resources that they need, whether that's information or these certified professionals to actually undertake that. In terms of the tactics, the program, when we, in the pilot, we did set up already a Facebook group, so we will be using social media. We will be using other communication channels to get the word out. And lastly, I think a real key, a key way that this program needs to work in order to be successful is to work with local partners. So I was very pleased to hear Mary Hegan from Cafes, and we're really much looking forward to working with them and with other community associations and local groups, because we know these are the trusted players in local communities. So if a program is going to be successful, it'll be because we will be working hand in hand with local community groups, environmental groups, and anyone basically who wants to work with us.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to that, because we have lots of enthusiastic people in our area for that. So I appreciate it. So can people get assessments if they're not in the area, and just if they want to pay for one?
Right now, we are offering the home assessments to anyone who is in the gray zones, so the light and the dark gray zones. At this point, we really need to get the program up and running. We need to build our capacity. We can make sure we can deliver this. So at this point, we can't commit to providing a service that people could pay for, but we've got a couple of years to get this tested and try it out. And depending on what demand's like, we will be looking at all potential ways to respond to that interest.
Yes, so as we were talking about, because we've met, and it was a good meeting, lots of areas of interest, because there's so many areas that are quite flat. So this is a big issue. So they're quite keen. The permeable pavement is something I'm very interested in, because that's one of the biggest problems. We were talking about this with infill. Is driveways, etc. So I'm really excited that is going to be promoted heavily, and hopefully that'll catch on. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, based on our review of the most appropriate practices, permeable driveways, as you point out, are one of the solutions, particularly for homes that don't have a lot of landscaping area left on their property. And I think this is another example where obviously dealing with professionals is going to be key. We need to make sure these permeable driveways are installed correctly and are maintained correctly.
Okay, so they have to be done by somebody certified.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I look forward to working with you. Take care.
Thank you, Councillor. And now Councillor Egli.
Thank you. And thank you, Julia and Simon. I got a little bit of a briefing in advance. My area is one of the areas that will benefit from the pilot. I wanted to, first of all, say publicly what I said privately. Love it, love it, love it. I think this is a great program, and if we have to kind of sugarcoat it and call it landscaping as opposed to good environmental stewardship, if it works, it works. what's the expression? A little honey helps the medicine go down. If it works, it works. And yeah, I think it's a great program. I had two questions. One is, do you have a sense, because each project will be a little bit different, the cost will be a little bit different depending on whether you're going with permeable driveway or rainwater garden or what you're doing. Do we have a sense about how many projects will fit into the pilot budget?
Based on our estimate, and this is all, so we took a look at, because it's all an integrated program, you need to have enough home assessments done, or you need to have enough trained landscapers to be able to provide the advice, which then translates into projects. So our estimate with the budget that's before you right now, the breakdown is that that would lead to approximately 125 projects in these first 3 years. Again, we've got to look at uptake. As you note, every project is going to be different. The amount that we're going to be providing a rebate for will be very much based on the amount of runoff that is going to be managed through the project. So a lot of this in the first couple of years with any pilot program is waiting and see, but it is based on that roughly 125 projects for the first couple of years. And I guess I would just add that we have looked out into the future to sort of say, okay, can we scale that up? Because obviously the numbers, not only, particularly in the 2 retrofit areas, we need to get that regular level of being able to deliver the program. And our preliminary thinking is that we will be able to scale that up once the program is in place.
And as a follow-up, since you have a budget, you have a financial parameter on this, if Councillor Hubley came forward with a project and Councillor Menard came forward with a project, is it who gets to you first, or is it a function of biggest bang for the buck? In other words, which project will have the more benefit, redirect more stormwater? How is that decision going to be made for people applying for the program?
So the focus of the pilot in the priority retrofit areas for the rebates is explicitly designed because all projects in those retrofit areas will have a benefit. We know that they will have a benefit to the receiving streams and watercourses. So that's our first way of screening and prioritizing. After that, the amount of rebate, so the percentage that we have proposed to rebate for each individual practice, has been calculated based in part on some of the practices we really want to see an increased uptake on. So the stormwater, the downspout redirects, for example, have a high percentage, a cost share approach that the city will take on. So do the rain gardens, for example. So that's another way we factored that in. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's those who are on the ball, get their home assessments done, and have their applications in early will, as long as you meet all of the application criteria, then you will be eligible first.
And very quick last question. You may have got to this. I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the presentation. When can people start to line up to get assessments done? When will the program kick off?
We are working very hard to get a program in place for late spring. Again, with the integrated nature of the program, we need to get those. We are already in discussion and have dates lined up for the first round of the professional training. And so that will happen in March. We need to get the home assessment up and running, but our aim is to, all of this work is very seasonal. So our aim is to get the program launched in late April or May.
Thank you. And again, thank you for your great work on this. I think it's going to be a huge success. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eglai, and you're forgiven for your tardiness. I understand you have, other things going on, Board of Health and COVID stuff and whatever. So, Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. And I just have a very brief question. I see through the enthusiasm of some of my colleagues that I'm assuming that this program will be well received and well registered for by residents. But I was curious. I know that in the report there was a bit of discussion about the challenge of communicating to residents during COVID-19. So I was just wondering if you could briefly elaborate as to how staff will attempt to engage residents.
Well, I think especially at the beginning, we will be relying on sort of social media and electronic means of communication to get the word out. And then secondly, again, building the relationships with local community organizations and groups that can get the word out on our behalf. So that will be a real push of that initial communications strategy at the beginning.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions from members of committee. Just make sure nobody has any more questions. On the report at the standing committee, and thank you, Julia, and thank you, Simon, for being here today and for your work on this. So that the Standing Committee on Environment Protection, Water and Waste Management recommend that Council, 1, approve the pilot residential stormwater retrofit program as described in this report to support the objectives of the Pinecrest, Westboro, and Eastern Subwatershed stormwater retrofit plans. 2, delegate the authority to the General Manager of Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development, or designate, to implement the pilot program as outlined in this report and to execute all agreements associated with this program. And 3, direct staff to report back to committee and council in 2023 on the results of the pilot program with recommendations for a continued program. So on that item.
Carried.
Thank you very much. Now we move to item number 3, which again comes back to us from previous discussions and directions that this committee has dealt with in the past, most recently with the information update that we received back in the fall. So it's the Lemieux Island Water Purification Plant Improvement Project, an endorsement of amendments to the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Plan. And I see we have Tessa Diorio here. I probably pronounced that wrong.
No, you did a perfect job. It's Tessa Diorio.
Fantastic.
So, there we go. The presentation started. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here today. As the chair mentioned, my name is Tessa Diorio, and I'm the city's risk management official and hydrogeologist working in PIDE. Today, I'm going to be talking about the proposed source protection plan amendments for the Lemieux Island Improvement Project. I'd just like to note that this presentation is focusing on the source protection that's under the Clean Water Act. If you do have questions related to the work plan or the engineering aspects of the Lemieux Intake Improvement Project, I will note them, and when I can have the project engineer follow up with you later. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background on drinking water source protection. So next slide, please. Thank you. Drinking water source protection is legislated under Ontario's Clean Water Act, which took effect in 2006. The Clean Water Act was created after the Walkerton tragedy in May of 2000, where the village of Walkerton, Ontario's drinking water supply was contaminated with E. coli bacteria, which was distributed to the users and caused over half the population, about 2,500 people, to become sick and resulted in 7 deaths. So the Clean Water Act is the first barrier in Ontario's multi-barrier approach to make sure that all people in Ontario have a clean source of drinking water. The other barriers include treatment, storage, testing, and distribution. And those barriers, like operator training, is all covered under the Safe Drinking Water Act, which received royal assent in 2002. So the Clean Water Act, the main goal is to make sure that the source of municipal residential drinking water supplies remain safe and from contamination and depletion. Under the Act, every municipal residential drinking water supply must have a mapped drinking water protection zone. So that is for an intake, a surface water intake in a river or a lake, you'd have an intake protection zone. And for a municipal well, you'd have a wellhead protection area. So every municipal intake has to have a mapped drinking water protection zone, and there have to be policies within that area to make sure that the supply is protected from contamination and depletion. And it's been shown that drinking water source protection is a good cost savings for a municipality because it's much more expensive to treat a water supply once it's been contaminated or to find or pipe in a new drinking water source. In the city of Ottawa, we are covered by 2 source protection plans, the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Plan and the Raisin South Nation Source Protection Plan. The policies within those plans were locally developed by source protection committees. The Clean Water Act provided the legislative framework and the policy tools, and the local team decided on the policies. Those policies range from very restrictive, like prohibition of certain high-risk activities and the most vulnerable areas, to less restrictive, such as education and outreach for certain activities. So next slide, please. So here's a map of the city of Ottawa with the city of Ottawa's drinking water protection zones. You can see there's two different shaded areas to show our two different source protection regions. To the east, we have the Raisin South Nation source protection region, and in the central and the west, we have the Mississippi Rideau source protection region. We have two municipal intakes in the Ottawa River at Britannia and Lemieux Island, and you can see the purple circles and the pink shaded area is the drinking water protection zone, or the intake protection zone for those intakes. We also have 6 municipal well systems for Vars, Shadow Ridge, and Greeley. There's 2 well systems in the village of Richmond, in Munster, and in Carp. These drinking water protection zones are found on Schedule K of the official plan, and they're also within Geo Ottawa if you ever want to check out and find out if you're living in a drinking water protection zone. Although those might look like they cover a large area, the most restrictive policies are limited within the areas identified in the red and orange, which actually only covers about 3% of the area in the city of Ottawa. So today I'm going to be talking about the Lemieux Island intake improvement project really quickly, and the proposed changes to the source protection plan for the new Lemieux Island intake. So next slide, please. So the Lemieux Island Water Purification Plant is one of 2 facilities that supplies drinking water to residents in the city of Ottawa. And this is Main Central Servicing, which services about 90% of the population of the city of Ottawa. Historically, the Lemieux intake has experienced challenges with water protections during extreme winter weather conditions, where there's a buildup of frazzle ice, which is this sort of buildup of ice crystals in the water and can form this slushy material which sort of blocks the intake. And you can see in the picture, there's an operator trying to shovel out the frazzle ice, or that slush that's being intaked at the intake. There were severe events in 2013 and 2015, and you can see the pictures on the right. We have 2 pictures of some of the emergency measures, which included the installation of 3 temporary feed lines, as well as 3 diesel pumps on the frozen river itself. So it was, you can imagine, it was quite a large endeavor to avoid the frazzle ice issue. In May of 2014, an environmental assessment was initiated to evaluate solutions to improve the water intake reliability. And one of the conclusions of that was to relocate the intake deeper into the river to avoid the frazzle ice issue. In May of 2016, the council approved the Lemieux Island intake water purification plant improvement project, with the main goal to relocate the intake deeper in the river. So note that the intake, to get it deeper in the river, it's further away from the Ottawa shoreline, and it's actually, the intake has moved now, or the new intake is on the Quebec side, so on the Gatineau side of the Ottawa River. And just note that the existing intake will be maintained as a backup intake. So next slide, please. So in 2018, the Safe Drinking Water Act was amended to include Clean Water Act requirements. So under the Act, there are 2 main legislative requirements associated with drinking water source protection. The first one is, before the city can get the municipal drinking water works permit, the source protection technical work has to be completed to the satisfaction of the Source Protection Authority. What this means is you have to have mapped out your intake protection zone for that new intake and identify any potential threats. So in your agenda package, the first attachment is a Section 48 notice from the Source Protection Authority. We have completed this work and we've submitted to the Source Protection Authority, and that work has been approved as being completed to their satisfaction. So this work was completed, and we received that notice in January of 2021. And we did work, as we were preparing the report and working on the project, we did work collaboratively with the Ministry of the Environment and the Source Protection Region. The second requirement is, before water can be provided from a new or altered drinking water system, the Source Protection Assessment Report and the Source Protection Plans have to be approved by the Ministry of the Environment. And that's under Section 34 of the Clean Water Act. And you can see in the agenda package, the other attachment is the Section 34 notice from the Source Protection Authority requesting a council resolution to support the amendment. And that amendment would be an amendment to the Rideau Valley Source Protection Assessment Report and the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Plan. And if you, next slide, please. So this slide just shows the area that changes. So the zone that was identified that will be protected and will have policies applied within it. So in this figure, you can see the two intakes. The yellow circle shows the existing intake at Lemieux Island, and the red circle is the new intake location. You can see the brown line that divides the Ottawa River. So the new intake is completely on the Quebec side of the river. The circle around each one of those zones is the intake protection zone 1, or the IPZ1, where there's the most prohibitive policies when it's on land. And the new zone, so it's a standard 200-meter radius around the intake itself. That new zone, you can see in the cross-hatched area. The new zone is completely on the Quebec side, and it's almost completely in the water except for a small portion that is within Gatineau, and that there are no significant threats within that area because that area is actually residential parkland. So there's actually no significant threats within that 200-meter radius, or the IPZ1. The next zone I want to point out is the area in pink, which is the intake protection zone, or the IPZ2, which there are some policies that apply. That IPZ2 is delineated based on flow in the river as well as flow in the sewer sheds. So that's why you can kind of see the angular on surface, you can kind of see the angular lines. That's just the sewer shed. So what this is the 2-hour time of travel. So under certain conditions, any contaminant that spills on the surface can make it to the intake within 2 hours. So that's why there are protection policies within this zone. Just noting that on land, that zone is already in the source protection plan and policies already apply to that zone. And that zone relates to the existing intake, which will be maintained as a backup intake. But since it will be maintained as a backup intake, we still have to keep that same zone. So that zone is not changing. So the area where the policies apply on land has not changed at all. The only area changing is that 200-meter radius circle around the new intake. I'd just like to note as well, there's two main permits that are required. One is the Ontario permit, that's for the plant itself. So it's the permit to distribute water in Ontario. And for that, we have to meet Ontario regulations. So that is under the Clean Water Act. The permit to take water, or the water taking permit, is actually going to be issued from Quebec because the new intake is on the Quebec side. There are similar source protection policies required on the Quebec side. So although in this map you only see areas where policies apply, and on the Ontario side, we are currently working with the Quebec Ministry of Environment to identify similar zones on the Quebec side to make sure that the new intake is protected from significant threats that could be on the Quebec side, and policies will be applied on Quebec by the Quebec government under their regulation. So again, the purpose of the report and this presentation today is for the council to seek the amendments to include the new drinking water protection zone in the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Plan. So I'd just like to say thank you for having me here today. And if you want more information on the City of Ottawa's Drinking Water Source Protection Program, please visit www.ottawa.ca/source protection. There is an interactive map on the site, so you can put your address in and find out if you're living in a drinking water protection zone. There's also a lot of good educational materials on that site. So I'm pleased to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Tessa. I appreciate that presentation and your work on this file and keeping our water safe. So we're going to go to Councillor Cloutier.
Thank you, Chair. Is it pronounced Ms. D'Iorio?
Just D'Iorio.
Just like the cookie with a D in front.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How long has the Lemieux Island intake been where it is?
I'm afraid I can't answer that question, but Paul Montgomery is on the line and he might be able to answer that question, if that's okay.
Yeah, pleases the chair. I don't mind answering that question.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead,
Thanks,
Paul.
Chair. Yeah, so Libya Island as a water purification plant has had 2 intake locations. So the current one was constructed in about 1990, 92, I believe. It went into service. And then there was an existing one, which was, again, very, very close to the plant itself. And that was in place since 1920 or thereabouts. So.
Okay, thank you. How, just so that I know, how deep, it was in 1992, how deep is the current intake and how deep will the proposed intake be?
Yeah, through the chair, the current intake sits in about 2.4 meters of water. So that would be from the water surface to about the center line. This newer intake we are looking at is, well, the design is nearly complete, but we're looking at something close to well over 20 meters.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm surprised how shallow the current one is, and 20 meters is much deeper. Noted. One of the important parts of this is that the intake is in the province of Quebec. Can you explain to us the safety implications, the jurisdictional implications of having the intake in another province, i.e. the permit to take water, access to the intake for maintenance? I imagine some maintenance is required. Ms. DiOrio, you spoke of the protection zone. That's a little bit in a residential zone that's currently for parkland in La Ville de Gatineau. What if there are changes to the use of that property? How does that impact our water intake?
I can speak about the source protection part. I'm not too sure about the sort of the implementation of access to the intake itself, but in terms of source water protection, the Quebec Ministry of Environment does have requirements for the mapping and the protection of those zones. So once that zone is mapped, there will be policies in place. That is my understanding. And we are working with the Quebec government currently to make sure that that protection zone is mapped out. I will have to follow up about your question related to, I guess, future implications about land use changes. I don't have an answer for that one, but I just know that the zones we identify now will have policies implemented, protection policies implemented. So it will be identified under their Environment Quality Act to be protected. Yeah, I'm not too sure how they implement the policies in terms of changes to land uses. So I will have to follow up on that one.
Okay, thank you. And I am interested as to the process of another provincial government that might change a permit to take water in certain conditions, that might restrict access for maintenance with respect to this intake. That is what, and what are the assurances that the City of Ottawa has from the City of Gatineau or the province of Quebec with respect to safeguarding that access. And I do recognize that the current intake will be maintained, and I think that's prudent. I think that's, I absolutely support that. But I am interested in our vulnerability with respect to long-term changes that might come, and how that might impact our ability to draw water from this new intake.
Thank you. Those are excellent questions, and I'll follow up with the project engineer and the project consultant working on the permits, and get an answer for you.
Thank you very much. Just as a follow-up for that, can you tell us if in any way the waterway, the Ottawa River, is federally regulated? What are the federal regulations with respect to that waterway?
I know that there is a provincial agreement, or sorry, there's a trans-provincial agreement. I'm not too sure about federal arrangements, but I do know that all of the source protection reports and all of this is going also through it's the Great Lakes and Interprovincial Waterways regulation as well. So there's an agreement. So all of that is being explored through that agreement as well. So there's a process. So both the source water protection in Ontario and Quebec, and all of this is going through that agreement and being reviewed by a larger panel.
Thank you very much.
Interprovincial government panel.
Thank you very much. And just one final question, just for my information, I presume the city of Gatineau draws its water from the Ottawa River. Where is the intake in relation to this proposed intake for the city of Gatineau?
That's another good question. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer. I'll have to follow up with that one as well.
If you could, I would appreciate it. And I'm sure that has been taken into consideration with whatever engineering or technical aspects that might bring. I just would appreciate the follow-up on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just have a point for fun. Geo Ottawa has mapping back to 1928, and you can see the Lemieux Island plant at that time, and you can see it grow over time. It's just north of the Roundhouse, which is still also there in 1928. So now we go to Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to you. Thank you for the presentation. Certainly this is about providing a consistent source of water to our residents. So I appreciate the risk that we're facing now and want to mitigate. I think Councillor Cloutier asked some very good questions. And my only one to piggyback on that, because he's exhausted my list, is if there are other Ontario municipalities that draw north of us from the Ottawa River, whether their intakes go into the Quebec side as well, and what historically their experience has been with the Quebec ministries. It would just, you know, my gut says it should be easier to work in Ontario and stay in Ontario and not have to be, you know, burdened by requirements that a Quebec ministry would place on us, and over time that could change. Whereas in Ontario, we're more or less safe, given we're an Ontario municipality. So there could be long-term risks. I don't know. I simply don't know. The Ottawa River is not going to dry up. It's a massive river, and we're going to continue to have water. But my only question is, if you are going to do additional research, I just want to know if there are other municipalities that draw from the Ottawa whose intake goes on the Quebec side. Have they had a positive long-term relationship with the Quebec ministry? And if yes, then that should give me greater satisfaction that the same would apply to us. But I have no other issues with your report. I think we need to do this. I appreciate the research you've done. And I'm just adding an extra question of research if you are going to follow up with Councillor Cloutier, and I thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. I actually am aware that there are no other intakes that move onto the Quebec side. This is sort of new territory that I'm working with or I guess the city is working with the Ministry of Environment, both the Source Protection Approvals Branch and the Approvals Branch with the MECP. And this is sort of a new ground for both the Ministry of Environment on the Quebec side and the Ministry of Environment on the Ontario side to sort of form these relationships and to work together.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like Gatineau's water intake is near the Portage Bridge on the east side of the Portage Bridge at Laurier. They have a treatment facility there. Not guaranteed, but that's what it looks like. Okay, Councillor McKenney.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation, Tessa. You're probably aware that the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories is looking at planning to build what they call a radioactive waste mound near the Ottawa River up by Chalk River. And there is quite a bit of concern from residents about its effect on our drinking water Can you, from just staff's perspective today, tell me what your concerns are in terms of the health, our residents and the risk to our drinking water of this mound?
Thank you, Councillor. So the nuclear laboratories in Chalk River are identified as a potential threat or a potential risk in the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Plan. They are identified but there are no legally binding policies that apply because it's out of the zone. So right now we monitor, the City of Ottawa monitors for I guess tritium in the water, and historically there has been small spills which have taken a few days to reach the city, and we've just been based on monitoring and make sure that the city is aware if there's anything that's happening. It's my understanding that the nuclear laboratories, the new repository, is actually an engineered facility, and it's my understanding that they are actually taking existing material that is contaminated and putting it into a safer repository, so an engineered facility with monitoring in place. So the city did provide some comments on that a couple of years ago, and we are monitoring the situation. So just overall, just aware that the city is aware of the situation, and the source protection plans do identify this and as sort of a keep an eye on it, and monitoring is our main focus at the moment.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. I think it is a real concern. We've had over 100 municipalities actually ask for it not to proceed because of the threat to the river, the Ottawa River, and eventually, or could be, our drinking water. So I appreciate your response, and I know Councillor Kavanaugh's got a motion coming to council in a week and a half asking that we take the same tack that other municipalities have and ask that it not proceed. So I'm sure you'll be called on also to respond more fuller in a more fulsome way to that as well. So thank you for this today. This is very interesting, always. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And we have Councillor Eglai next. Sorry, Keith, can't hear you.
Sorry. I thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on something that Councillor Brockington had sort of put on the table. A lot of how we treat our drinking water and the legal obligations we have as a city and a council to make it safe arise out of what happened, unfortunately, in Walkerton and the changes that emanated from that. I guess my question is, you indicate you've been working with the Ministry of the Environment as would be expected. Have any red flags been raised in that on the Quebec side, there, Walkerton wasn't the same thing, if you will. It was an Ontario municipality. There was the inquiry, there were the recommendations, there were the changes. That didn't necessarily happen on the Quebec side. So what protections do we have with the intake being on the Quebec side to make sure that we can always keep up with what regulations and changes and protections are put in place on the Ontario side to keep the water safe for residents in Ottawa? Just, it makes me a little uneasy that we're relying on the good graces of another government to make sure that we meet our obligations to our upper level of government. It just makes me a little uneasy. So I'm wondering if there's been that discussion with the Ministry of the Environment, how they've reacted to that, what they may have suggested to us as safeguards, so we can make sure that we're able to maintain any requirements put upon us by our provincial government.
Thank you, Councillor. You've added another layer, and that's a good layer to add. I will definitely follow up. Like I said, the conversation has been opened, and the Ontario government and Quebec government are working together and talking. But I think that's an excellent additional layer to add onto this. So changes to the Ontario regulations and how would that affect the protections that are in Quebec, because we can't implement policies. We can implement policies in Ontario. We can't implement policies in Quebec. We do rely on the Quebec government to implement their own policies. So we do need to have some kind of coordination to make sure that those two sets of policies are sort of coordinated and in line with the requirements. So
I mean, I would feel more comfortable if I knew that it was a province to province discussion going on. And the Ontario Ministry of the Environment said, we're going to do this. And the province of Quebec said, okay, well, we'll enter into an agreement with you to make sure that if you do this, then that will happen. So I don't know if that's a parallel process or we're sort of on our own with this project. And again, relying on the good graces of another government rather than one we need to answer to.
Thank you, Councillor. I've noted this down and I will follow up with the project manager, with the staff that's looking at the regulations, and I'll follow up directly with the ministries as well and see if there's something we can help coordinate.
Thank you. And I guess this is a question for the chair. Chair Moffat, if we approve today the report, or is this just for information at this point?
Oh, sorry, is that came?
No,
sorry.
No, it's for me.
Okay.
It's yeah, the report is that we approve a new water intake for the purification plant. I know Marilyn Chernow looked to she had her hand up and wanted to jump in.
Yeah, hi everyone. I think it's important to note that the plant is also regulated by the Ministry of the Environment. So while there's also the source water protection aspect, the plant is actually has a lot of monitoring and safeguards. There's chlorination and those types of aspects. So there are assurances at the plant to ensure the safety of the drinking water as well. So it's not just the source water, it's the actual operation and treatment of the water at the plant.
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate that. But I guess, so what I'm asking, Chair Moffat, if we say yes today, then we're saying yes to proceeding with this project on the other side of the border.
I just want to clarify the council resolution is to include the source protection, the new source protection. It's just to include the new source protection amendment in the Ontario source protection reports. So it's just to endorse the amendment of the source protection plans. The project, it's my understanding that the project has already been approved by council.
The resolution in front of me does say that recommend that council approve the new water intake for the Lemieux Island water purification plant as described in this report, and the endorsements of the source protection.
Okay, thank you.
Karina Duclos has her hand up. I don't know if you want to speak.
Thank you, Chair. So as you know, the project is under design, almost completed. We provided an IPD last year with an update and information on the project. What we wanted to flag was that the original intake that was approved under the environmental assessment that was on the Ontario side was modified to the second intake, which is the one Tessa is talking about, on the Quebec side, what we call it hole number 2. And it is deeper and better because the original intake through the value engineering session we did proved that we will still have the risk of fracilites. So that's why we are in Quebec right now with the intake. The project team is actively working on permits and agreements with the province and with the city of Gatineau and with the ministers. So we will provide an update on where we are and how we cover the areas that you have raised as concerned as part of the whole permits and agreement process that we have under the project.
All right, thank you very much, Karina. Any other questions from members of the committee? Councillor Aguilar, you good?
Well, I'm not going to say good exactly. Like I said, I would be more comfortable if it was province talking to province and the Ontario government was saying this is all good and we got you covered. But we don't seem to have that protection.
Right. At the same time, though, everything we do with this plant has to adhere to the Clean Water Act. And we're doing that.
Fair enough.
All right. Okay, so I see no further questions from members of the committee. Thank you to Tessa for being here today and for your presentation. So the report is that the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management recommend that Council approve the new water intake for the Lemieux Island Water Purification Plant as described in this report and carry the resolution provided in document 3 regarding the endorsement of amendments to the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Plan required pursuant to Section 34 of the Clean Water Act to include the new intake for the Lemieux Island Water Purification Plant. Is that item carried?
Carried.
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 Thank you. So that's it for the regular agenda items. In-camera items, there are none. Information previously distributed, our annual drinking water source protection status update 2020, which you will have all received prior to this meeting. I noticed a motion for consideration subsequent meeting. I've not received any. Inquiries. I've not received any. Other business. None. Adjournment.
Okay.
So our next meeting
Adjourned.
is scheduled for Tuesday, March 30th, 2021. We likely shifted that because of March break, which no longer exists. So all good. We'll stick with March 30th, 2021, and we will see you then. Thank you, everyone, today.
Thank you all. Bonne journée.